welcome back to our next session in the Business Advisory channel sponsored by Reckon. I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Alan Fitzgerald from Practice Connections Advisory. Alan will be speaking on the topic of why Microsoft could replace your app stack. Over to you, Alan.
Good morning, everyone. It's Alan Fitzgerald here again. Thank you for joining in on this session, which is about unleashing the power of Office 365 for your firm. Now, a few little comments to make here. The pages run backwards. Anybody that has sat in on any of my presentations will know the utter delight or sadness, I suppose, that when they see the pages running in reverse order, that the slideshow is coming to an end. Some view that with a great sense of excitement, some with a great deal of disappointment. Hopefully you'll view it with a bit of disappointment. So let's get into it. Why am I here today? So my name, as I mentioned, Alan Fitzgerald. I run an independent advisory practice for generally focusing in on the accounting practice market. So I spent close to 30 years in technology, 21 of those in tax and accounting technology. And in 2015, I helped a firm set up, move from their practice management tax accounting platforms. And the managing partner said to me, look, I think you've actually got a really good business in this. This is something you should explore. And 5 years later, here I am today. Look, I have been doing this in such a way that one of the things that I've noticed is that there wasn't a lot of emphasis on Microsoft Office. So I've done this presentation a couple of times at these presentations. Partly the reason is that I feel obliged to do it because nobody's really talking about Microsoft Office. And I would prefer my clients to say, thank you for telling us, rather than why didn't you actually tell us about this in the first place? Now, I am doing a couple of other sessions at the conference. One is with Intuit, has a really interesting conversation about accounting firms and how they can, some of the key points they need to bear in mind when changing software systems. And the other one is a dedicated one for accounting firms, again, on CRM systems, so client relationship management systems. And they're kind of taking more and more the fore, particularly around these COVID times and distributed workforces. And I think that's where I think there's going to be a lot of more emphasis into the future. Given the recent announcement from the potential merger takeover of Greatsoft by MYOB, the whole market's been thrown up in the air. So where that's going to go, nobody knows, but it's going to be another 12 plus months of disruption. So I guess from today, I'd like really just to talk about the future and what some of the things that you can do today. Now, why do firms contact me? So my philosophy on this is that it doesn't matter if you're starting out or if you have an established firm. It's basically your responsibility as a business owner to create as efficient a setup that you possibly can. Now, part of that is buying the best that you can afford when you start out, because as you get progressively more mature in your business and more successful in your business, it actually allows you the opportunity to revisit what you do in that business and make it better again. Your team might have grown, so I'd grown some of the software solutions, and it's just that opportunity to increase the efficiencies and productivity within the business and make it, a bit more of attractive selling prospect if that is coming into the future. So firms generally contact me because they've got areas about productivity. There might be user frustration with older systems or a lack of integration in systems, things around finance, how they do the internal reporting, and this management of jobs, etc. And so this is part of the reasons that firms come to me. Sometimes they want me to do projects, which I quite happily do. Sometimes I offer just simple brainstorming sessions. And other times I actually act as what I call a fractional CTO. So it's basically they hand over their IT strategy development side of things, they give it to me, and I help them and I manage that on their behalf to go forward, because it frees up their time and allows them to do a lot more. The key thing, as I mentioned, is buy the best that you can afford, because when you do that, you will never lose money. It's a false economy to get to buy cheaply from that perspective. Part of that is because, as this slide says, you don't rise to the level of the goals, you fall to the levels of your systems. So one of the things that, as you know, is that when you buy a new car from an old car, it suddenly feels, oh my God, this feels fantastic. It's so, it's so smoother, it's more efficient, it's got all the bells and whistles. There's things that didn't exist in my previous car. And that's the experience that happens when you change software and you change processes. Is there pain? Of course there's pain. But however, the goals and the outcomes as a result of that are significantly better. So it's something to bear in mind. Now, part of the things, this is a very famous curve. It's called the Everett-Rogers diffusion of innovation curve. And what you find with this particular curve is down at the bottom left-hand side, they're the people that, we see it as the people that line up to the Apple store. So we got to have that product. We got to be the first. We have to be it doesn't matter how much it costs. We just want to be the first. And they're called the innovators. And as you go through that bell curve, your descriptor change. So you become an early adopter or an early majority, a late majority, or ultimately the laggards. Now, what happens in the world, and that has been happening particularly as of late, is that the innovators, as soon as they get to the top of that early majority phase, they're already itching to find something else. And so if you join too late on those bell curves, you can actually find yourself falling behind relatively quickly, because the innovators are always looking at what else is new that's coming out. And what you'll find in the world of software is that the development cycle never ceases. It's definitely, I should rephrase that. The development cycle should never cease. It is slowing down, unfortunately, with some vendors, but it should never cease. So there's always something new and something better that you can actually achieve and attain that will benefit you going into the long run. So you must always, like a business, you always have to reinvent business. Software is basically doing the same thing. You always have to be on that leading edge, because otherwise, from a vendor's perspective, if they go into the laggards, then you're stuffed. Basically, the change to go from a laggard to an innovator is really, really hard. And so you'll see that today as some of these vendors are trying to move from their old client server environment to the cloud, and it's taking them a long time. They don't have the expertise, and they often farm it out to third parties to do the development work because they simply don't have the capabilities in-house. So take particular note of that slide, because that is kind of the mindset that you need to get into. If you're still down in the bottom rung and the industry is at that very top rung of those bell curves, then you've got a lot of catching up to do. So it's incremental, and it's part of the reasons that I like to talk about Microsoft Office, because Microsoft Office is using that Japanese Kaizen, the continuous improvement model. It's always improving. It's always moving forward. So these areas that are moving, obviously, we talk a lot about the cloud. We talk about the democratization of technology. That's your mobile phone. You can run entire businesses from a mobile phone. It's the client interactions. Now, we've seen that particularly with the COVID-19 over the last 6 months. And that's potentially going to progress longer into 2021. But it's that ability where previously you were able to talk to a colleague and say, hey, did you talk to Mary last week, or did you talk to Fred last week about his accounts? And suddenly you're unable to do that without having to pick up the telephone. So that client interaction, not only with the client directly, but with your peers within the firm or your team talking about that is being challenged within the marketplace. And it's then that ability from to be able to be proactive and reactive to those scenarios that is really changing the way that firms are doing. Compliance will never go away. I'm not one of these guys that says, oh, that's the death of compliance. That's utter bullcrap, if you ask me. Excuse my French. Compliance will never go away. We've just seen the government make wholesale changes to the tax legislation. That is changing compliance. Compliance changes average, maybe anything up to 30% every year. There's always tweaks and so forth in there. So compliance will always be the bread and butter of the business. But it's what the ability that you can do within those particular components that allows you to offer more and more services through there. Now, one of the things I often quote a 19th century German philosopher. I know it's the kind of stuff that I do. At the time, he spoke about truth. And he said that truth passes in 3 stages. At first, it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, and then it's accepted as self-evident. Now, I changed the word truth to technology. So when we look at technology and we think about when that technology was first introduced and how people reacted to that, to then thinking about how that technology is being used today, it actually has passed through those 3 standards. So at first ridiculed, then violently opposed, and then accepted as self-evident. And we can kind of see that as to how the technology of choice has evolved over the last 15, 20 years. I won't go through obviously all of one of those, but if you are an accounting firm where your technology that you're providing is based around the generation that you're in, you have to also take into account that it has to cater for the generation that you're employing or that are part of your team. And where that in particular comes in is that millennial category, so the sub 40 category, so where you have that scenario where they are digital natives. They've been brought up on digital, so they don't know any world like I do, which was never had a mobile phone. If you made an appointment, you had to keep by that appointment because there was no way to contact anybody. I used the telex when I first started in business. I won't even just Google telex if you've never heard what a telex is. It's an old way of communicating. But was fundamentally email, but you paid by the minute, and it's roughly about 1,000 times slower. So it's this generational change. You look at mobile phones, 4G. I mean, when I was growing up, it was either a parking space or it was a classroom. So this technological evolution that we've seen within the business world has been quite dramatic, and it's really important to manage and match that within your particular business. So in the COVID scenario, and I hate using the word the new normal, I think it's just a weak platitude. It's changing the way that you do things. It's about having a business continuity plan in place. It's about understanding the best way of being able to interact with your clients. Now, part of this disruption of the last 10 or 12 years has been accounting technology. So on the screen here is just a random selection of a couple of vendors, 2 dozen vendors. All of these did not exist 10 or so years ago. But the impact that they have made into the Australian accounting market already, they would have gone through that. First it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, and then it's now the norm. These are some of the tools that are doing that scenario. If you think about the firms and how they embrace cloud, when cloud was first mooted, people were going, no, I do not want my information up in the internet. I want it there in the corner, so I can see it and I can feel it. It's tangible. Nowadays, if you're not in the cloud, you're actually at a disadvantage. And that is going to get progressively more and more. And this is where we're finding some of the legacy vendors in the marketplace really struggling because they don't offer the flexibility that the more modern cloud-based solutions do offer. And right about now, as I'm recording this particular scenario, there has been a takeover has been announced between MYOB and Greatsoft, which is again going to throw the whole market into disarray. So we're not quite sure as to what's going to happen there. Only time will tell. So cloud vendors, one of the distinct advantages with them is that they can update their software once and everybody gets a copy of the information. That is in particular where I want to talk about Microsoft 365. Now, Microsoft Office 365 for most accounting firms is based around Word, Excel, and Outlook, and rightly so. They have been the mainstays and the cornerstones of these solutions for the Office suite for, well, 20 years. It was the first time I started playing around. Actually, no, it's not 20 years. It's 1993. A long time ago, too long ago, was the first time I started using Microsoft Excel. I haven't gotten any better, by the way. It's still, add plus a couple of columns because I don't need to. But it has actually evolved, and the capabilities of Microsoft Excel in 2020 versus what it was in 1993, still fundamentally a spreadsheet, but with a whole pile of added bells and whistles. And this is another thing. You've got to keep up to date with what your technology is doing. Because if you think Microsoft Office is Word, Excel, and Outlook, or possibly Teams today, you're in for a bit of a shock, because the Office 365 world continues to grow exponentially. And it is going to be a huge, huge opportunity and a benefit for accounting firms into the future. Now, primarily, the reason behind that is that it can offer a huge amount. From the previous slide that I showed you, all those little bells, add-on apps, Microsoft Office can do a lot of that. And I'm going to show an example of that in a couple of slides' time. If we look at Office, and some of the icons are unfortunately a bit out of date because Microsoft do have a tendency just to randomly change the icons. This is just a snapshot of some of the tools that exist within Microsoft within there. Project planning, a great application, just download it for free onto your phone. Microsoft Lens for scanning documents, scanning pictures, scanning whiteboards. It is fantastic. It's probably one of the best apps that I've seen around there because it automatically reconfigures the solution. Power Automate, that's a solution that is like Microsoft not Microsoft, but like Zapier, where you can create a job. If this happens, then do this. And so you can start to build up automation free as part of your Microsoft Office plan. Forms, so capture information from a client and write them appropriately throughout the practice. SharePoint, Teams, a lot of people are using Teams these days in lieu of Zoom. Why would you buy a copy of Zoom when you can already have Teams for the same price? So it's about understanding and rationalizing your product, your platform tech stack. And a really good example of that is this slide. Now, this slide down on the left-hand side is a series of applications, all of which can be replaced by Microsoft Office. Now, the dollar value down the bottom left-hand corner, I think it's about $185, call it, maybe round it up to $200, $29, round that up to $30. That's per user per month. Now, that's incredible value, right? So you're getting, if you have 10 staff, instead of paying $2,000 a month, you're paying $300. That's a significant cost saving. You do obviously have that to configure that, and if you want to learn more, I've got a couple of organizations that I do work with that I prefer, that have got a lot of experience in the accounting market that can help you configure it, because your total cost of ownership and your return on investment is going to be really quick and it's going to be really cheap. So you're going to get a return on that investment really quickly. If we look at the actual pricing of Microsoft Office, one of the more popular ones is the Microsoft 365 Business Premium, $27.50 plus GST, so roughly $30 per user per month. And that's outstanding is the only way to describe it. It is absolutely outstanding. But like anything when it comes to software, you have to understand the proper methodology and how it all hangs together and learn about the application. So as I said, I don't work for Microsoft, but I show the benefits of this to my clients and what it can do and how it can reduce the amount of money that they're spending on their tech stack by replacing that with Microsoft Office solutions. Now, Microsoft Office or Microsoft full stop is putting hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into this suite every single year. So it is a constant evolution of the suite. Please resist, unless your IT guys are Microsoft certified and they know the latest bells and whistles all around Microsoft, and I've got all the capabilities of doing all the Microsoft certification, I would suggest not using your IT support to do this. I would suggest using a third-party company, and there's plenty of them that specialize in putting the pieces of the puzzle together and then delivering it back to your IT guys to support. Part of the reason behind this is that I've found in the past, and you might have experienced, is the IT guys, it's all shiny objects and bells and whistles. They start doing a project, but it's never quite completed. If you're going to go down this path, and you can certainly bite off a small little bit and then give them a small little task to test, but I would strongly suggest using a third party that specializes in setting up the actual software suite. So the fundamental is that there's big difference between the guys that keep the lights on versus the one that can actually help you move the business forward with the use of the solution. That is all I have for you today. I just really wanted to give you a little condensed snapshot of some of the areas that you can do. It is an incredibly exciting space. Very few people are actually talking about it because there isn't actually any money to be made out of it. And that's the sad truth about this, is that anybody can buy a Microsoft license. And so it's really, you could spend the time doing it yourself and having a play around with what you can get. So there isn't really a business for being able to sell a product to you. But the capabilities within this suite are phenomenal. So I would strongly recommend taking a closer look at it. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. There's a QR code. You can use the QR scanner on your mobile phone app, the LinkedIn app. So some iPhone users might have to give permission to the camera, but simply scan that over the QR code and it will take you directly to my LinkedIn. Otherwise, there are my contact details within there, including some service offerings that I've got on screen. Thank you so much for having me here today. I look forward to the Q&A session. And yes, have a fantastic rest of the conference. That's all I can say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan, on that insightful presentation on the latest tool set from Microsoft Office. Some very useful tips there that we can all apply back in the office. For the audience, please do reach out to Alan directly if you have any further questions about his presentation. Thank you.